We already knew that Saquon Barkley was a super freak. The scouting combine isn't for players like him. It's for guys like Shaquem Griffin, who nearly didn't even get an invite to the damn thing, but he went out and he killed it. Brendan Albert is here. I am Adrian Fenke. We're going to get into the combine right now, get into some discussion. And let's get into the Saquon Barkley just real quick. Obviously, he lit up the combine, but you know what? We already knew what he was capable of.
Yeah, guys. I mean, the combine is the underwear Olympics. You know, I've always said that the combine, the most important thing that goes on at it is about 60% of it is medical in the interviews. Those are the most important things. I mean, every year there's a guy who slides in the draft and people are like, oh, why is he sliding? It's probably because he had a medical issue or he had some type of off-the-field thing that caused teams to slide. Saquon is what he is. I mean, if anyone needed to know how good Saquon Barkley is, just pop on game tape. We knew that he was this dude. So he didn't have to come out. He didn't have to do all the stuff that he did at the combine, but he did because he's a competitor and he wanted to do it. He had the fastest 40-yard dash time in over 20 years for any running back over 230 pounds. That tells you how special he is. Caught the ball really well, looked really fluid in all of the drills. The only question is Saquon Barkley the number one overall pick? To me, he is. You're the Cleveland Browns. You're a bad football team. Getting a good quarterback or getting a good receiver on offensive tackle, just getting one player isn't necessarily going to make the draft, but you got to start somewhere. Don't overthink it. Draft the best player available and then figure out a quarterback later.
Yeah, I exactly agree. And the reason for that is I see all these quarterbacks, and I feel like they're all kind of clustered together. There's not much separation between the four. So if you take the best player available and you pair him with one of the quarterbacks in number 4, I think that's the way to go. And it would even help out your rookie quarterback because, well, you got a guy as explosive as Saquon Barkley as your back, as your safety valve to kind of hang on.
Absolutely, Adrian. I mean, look, if I'm the Browns, here's how I would attack it. I'm going to go out and sign A.J. McCarron. I'm going to front load the hell out of the deal. Even if it means I give him more money than he deserves, fine. I'll front load it. I'll sign him for 1 year. I'll draft Saquon Barkley because you know what? A.J. McCarron, he's an average quarterback. I'll say that off the bat, but he's better than anything the Browns got. So you get that. So you know you have a surefire guy there as your starting quarterback. You draft Saquon, and I'm with you. I don't think there's a huge difference between Darnold and Allen. Those are my two top guys. And you figure one of them is most likely going to be there at 4 unless the Colts trade out. So at that point, you just say, hey, whatever one is there at 4, that's our quarterback, and we rock and roll with it. And if they're not, then maybe we trade back a little bit. Maybe we get, Rosen or we get Baker, like maybe at 6, something like that, if possible.
Yeah. All right, we'll get to Josh Allen in a second. Just wanted to focus on Shaquem Griffin real quickly. So people were thinking he put up 5 in the bench press. He puts up 20.
Yeah.
He runs a 4.38. So this is what the combine is for. It's for guys like that. And for everybody that doubted him and stuff like that, I mean, you can't doubt him anymore. So how high does he get drafted? Where does he go? It's so hard to kind of distinguish.
It is. I mean, it's unprecedented. We've never had a player like him, get to this point. His numbers are unbelievable. His bench press, his speed, he looked great. He worked out at safety. He worked out at backer. So he has that tweener ability. All this stuff of, he's going to be a walk-in on special teams stud. Yeah, he is. But you know what? He's also going to be a damn good defensive player. I think he's going to be a guy who, kind of like Dante Buchanan, how the Cardinals use him, or Mark Barron, how the Rams use him. I would probably say a 3rd-round pick, but to be honest with you, it's all about how a team looks at that hand. We have to talk about the elephant in the room. Life's not fair, but at the same time, these NFL GMs, they are drafting players not for feel-good stories, but so they can keep their jobs. Griffin's not a feel-good player. He's a football player. I would probably say he's a 3rd-round pick is my ballpark guess, though.
Yeah, I would agree. But before the combine, you were probably thinking, what, 5th, 5th, 6th, 7th? So he jumped up a couple rounds.
Yeah, I mean, I would say he was a 5th. I mean, I think if you put on the Auburn tape, dude's a missile. He flies around the fields. I probably would have said he's a 5th. He goes and tests well at the combine. It wasn't a question for me of is he athletic. It was, is he athletic enough to play safety or play outside backer? And putting up those numbers, and when you can put him next to other guys who are having those conversations, it solidified it for me. So that's why I say I think he's a 3 to a 5 round pick.
Josh Allen, also put on a show. But like we were talking about with Saquon Barkley, we already knew that Josh Allen had a cannon. So while everybody was, lighting up like a Christmas tree talking about his arm, you and I already knew that he could throw the ball 65, 70 yards. What was important with him were the mechanics. That's what people were looking for during the on-field workouts. And, during the Senior Bowl, he really struggled. So do you feel like his mechanics improved?
I do, Adrian. Here's the thing. When we go into pro days and we go into the combine and the Senior Bowl, a scout once told me you'd have to use that 24-hour rule. For 24 hours, you can gush and get excited and look at him and say, oh, my God, look at this, that, and after. But when you get to hour 25, go back and watch the game tape and say, okay, this is really what he is. So, you look at him, he drops that 70-yard ball on a dime and has the whole stadium in mute.
Buzzing.
Because, everyone's just looking around like, holy shit, that thing was dropped out of the sky, man. And he can do that. He's going to make those throws. So if you went into it and you were really surprised at his arm talent, then I would probably say you're like most folks who haven't watched many Wyoming games because he has that type of ability. His footwork looked really clean. I actually thought his footwork looked better than a guy like Rosen and a guy like Lamar Jackson. So that to me was really important. Accuracy looked pretty damn good. His center of balance was pretty good. Weight transfer, all pretty darn good. Everything looked really well for him.
Yeah, and he was my number one guy coming into the combine. He remains my number one guy. He's been my number one guy. A lot of people like Rosen and Darnold, but Allen has been the guy for me. I'm not afraid to be a little different. Last year, I liked Deshaun Watson. That was my guy, and, I hit on him. I'm not always right because with Allen, I feel like out of the four, he has the biggest bust potential, but he also has the highest ceiling. And if he can harness that rocket arm and, get the accuracy down, I think he could be a threat. So, they were talking a little bit about how he reminds people of John Elway. And because of the fact that when John Elway came into the league, he had this rocket arm, and he didn't have to play with anticipation because his arm was so he had that gunslinger mentality. He didn't need to, anticipate guys being open because, he could just throw them open because of his arm.
Yeah, I see that. The guy I've compared him to is actually Stafford for these very similar reasons. Even you look at their numbers, both Stafford and Allen's completion percentage were pretty low in college, but they have this freakish arm that they're able to just grip it and rip it. So I like him a lot. I would agree with you, Adrian. I think Allen has the highest boom ceiling of everyone, probably has the biggest bust of all of them. So, but he's my number one quarterback. I think he has the best opportunity to really be a Hall of Fame level guy. Trade-off is if you're a team like the Cleveland Browns, it's hard for you to also to justify that. Like if I walked into that room and I said, hey, fellas, here's the deal. This guy could be a first ballot Hall of Famer in 15 years, or he could be laughed out of the league because he's just that inaccurate. If you're the Browns, you're the only franchise who says, you know what, we might have to go the safer pick and go Darnold, because I think Darnold, he's very vanilla ice cream, ham sandwich, is very solid, fine. I think his ceiling is a guy like Tony Romo. Fine, that's good, but I think if you're the Browns, though, that's why you would say, hey, let's get McCarron and let's also get Allen so we can let Allen develop, not force him in there and try to rush it. And worst case scenario, if Allen really doesn't do well and takes him longer, we can let McCarron stick around.
Yeah, the thing that scared me with Allen was watching him get on a knee and hit the field goal post from 50 yards, because I remember Kyle Bowler did the same damn thing about 10 to 15 years ago. And you have all the comparisons. Well, he's got the biggest arm since Jamarcus Russell. Well, we saw what happened with him. So there are some scares, but Josh Allen has been my number one guy for a while.
I'm with you, Adrian. I'm sticking with it. He's my number one guy. That said, I understand if the Browns decide to go Darnold over him, because that's the only team I can understand that. The other thing I really like about Allen is I think there's only two teams in the entire NFL who really have to consider weather as a factor for their quarterbacks. That's the Browns and that's the Bills. With that outside weather, getting that lake effect, all that wet air, wind, etc., I think that the value of having a big, strong arm is important. Hence, I think a guy like Darnold, I think he has good enough arm, but obviously Allen has a much better arm. I think that's where you see value there.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go next. Like a team at number two, you play in New York. Josh Allen would be perfect for that. Darnold, I do have question marks about his arm strength a little bit. So there you go. All right, so moving on to Josh Rosen and Baker Mayfield, and it's funny because these are two guys with these polarizing personalities, and we've heard reports leading into the combine that people are worried about Josh Rosen's character. Well, according to reports, Baker Mayfield and Josh Rosen were the two guys out of the quarterbacks that really impressed during the interview process. How about that?
Honestly, I'm not really surprised. I mean, I think Baker's one of those guys, when he walks in the room, potentially half the room's going to hate him, half the room's going to love him. He has that really over-the-top personality. I've said in our past shows, he reminds me of a personality so much of Phillip Rivers. Ultra competitive, is going to get in your face, isn't afraid to show his emotion. I'm a big Baker fan. I really like Baker. I think he did a really nice job. His footwork looked great. Flip side, let's go to Rosen. I've said that Rosen is the best passer of all the quarterbacks out there. From emotion, he is exactly what you want your youth guys to teach. Problems with him, concussion issues, shoulder issues, hasn't been able to stay healthy, can't get out of the pocket. He is pretty much a statue out of there. So if he's a guy who has, potential health concerns and he can't escape pressure, what do you think is going to happen when those defensive linemen are faster and the linebackers are faster and safeties and corners are all faster? That's a concern for me. The other concern I have with him, his footwork, it just looked like he didn't even really care. He pretty much looked like he was just going out there and just, hey, I'm going to throw it and rip it. Look at his three-step drop. His three-step drop, he's only getting 3 yards. If you're only getting 3 yards of depth, an offensive guard or a center is going to get pushed into your lap. You got to get 5+ yards in 3-step drop. Maybe it was just a day where he just really wasn't thinking about it, and you know what? His film doesn't show that. But if you're nitpicking these quarterbacks, it's a concern for me. If you're not going to give these offensive linemen a deep enough pocket, you're asking yourself to get hit in the face.
I'm glad you made the point about the injuries, because I was going to say something along those lines. When you watch him play, he does struggle getting out of the pocket. I was watching some of his Washington tape the other day, and he just can't get past it. I mean, you have Vita Vea in the backfield consistently, and he's struggling to get out of the pocket. And you talked about the injuries, and if he's a guy that's always getting hurt, you don't want that, obviously, especially if you're picking top 5.
Yeah, and not the quarterback position. Your best ability is your availability. And if you're a highly drafted quarterback, you've got to be able to get on the field. So, like I said, I think Rosen's the best passer of all of them, but I could see him being the last pick. I mean, I think he would still go before Lamar Jackson, but I could see him being the 4th pick.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the guy that Cleveland appears to be gushing about, we never know about reports during this time of year. I mean, you don't know what's real and what's not. But the report I read, they may take Saquon Barkley number 1 and Baker Mayfield number 4.
I would be okay with that. And here's the reason I say that. I understand that Darnold's probably the safest. Allen's probably the highest reward, but Baker's the biggest competitor. I think Baker's the guy who walks into that locker room and says, hey, enough of whatever happened before. We're fixing it and we're flipping things and moving forward. I think a lot of what the Jets did when they went double down both of those safeties they drafted last year, everyone talks about how they completely changed that locker room, that, hey, we're in an attitude now. Baker's one of those guys who can have that. I think if you go to a team like Cleveland, you have to have an attitude. You have to have confidence. You have to be able to believe, I'm going to succeed no matter what happened the last year or last 15 years in the city. So that's why I could see Baker being a good fit. I still would take Allen or Darnold over him if I'm the Browns. But for some reason, let's say maybe for some reason Baker goes, or let's say Allen goes 2 or Donald goes 2 to the Giants. And all of a sudden the Bills trade up, get the Colts pick, and the other one goes. That's fine. I'm okay with taking Baker there at 4.
You're talking about Sam Darnold and vanilla ice cream. It's got me thinking. It's got me thinking of things. So if I'm thinking, it's like, all right, so Baker Mayfield would be like your rainbow sherbet because he's got that it factor and there's something sexy about it. And then you got Josh Allen. You look at that arm, and I love me some peanut butter, so I go like peanut butter ripple for him. And then for Josh Rosen, I'm going mint chocolate chip because not everybody likes the character, and I'm not a mint guy. I don't like the mint chocolate chip. And then Sam Darnold, just straight up vanilla and nothing sexy about him. And you didn't throw at the combine. We kind of talked about that a little bit. Not really that big of a deal, but I still would have liked to see him out there.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, here's what's going to happen. And, the toughest thing for him is going to be interviews then. Because
Yeah,
he's going to go into an interview and GM's going to sit down and say, hey, how much of a competitor are you?
exactly.
And
That's
Darnold's
why I
going to
wanted to see him throw.
Yep, and Darnold's going to say, "Hey, I'm a big competitor. I want to go out there. I want to compete. And I want to say." And then the assistant GM is going to say, "Oh, okay, so we'll see you throw tomorrow then, right? Because you said you're a competitor." And then they're going to try to box him into a corner. So that's the toughest thing, for those guys. Now, flip side, the combine isn't real football. We have to understand that it's not real football. These aren't their receivers. They don't have the same timing. They don't have the same route tendencies. They don't have the same speed. They don't have the same burst. So I understand if you're a guy who doesn't have the huge arm, you don't want to go somewhere where there's a more uncontrolled factor. You say, hey, I'm going to go to my pro day, and I'm going to really show out my pro day. What makes you look bad is when all of the other quarterbacks throw. If only one of them didn't throw, another one didn't throw, like if the Baker said, hey, I'm not going to throw, or Lamar said, hey, I'm not going to throw, then obviously it's not as big of a deal. But when all of those other guys do throw and you don't, that's where you open the window for those other guys to catch up to you.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of Lamar Jackson, before we kind of head into other things, up and down day, skittish a little bit. So he didn't run the 40, probably to make a point that he doesn't want to be a wide receiver. So he throws, and it was just meh.
Look, if I'm Lamar Jackson and someone asked me about why I didn't run the 40, I would turn to him and say, if you don't know I'm fast, Google me. You'll know I'm fast. He doesn't need it. Like, he doesn't need this, oh, I need to run the 40. No, we know he's a freak. He'll probably still run it as pro day just to run it, but he's a fast dude. Even if he doesn't run at the pro day, I don't care. I know how fast this guy is. I know how electric he is. His problem, footwork, looked very sloppy. He's got a very narrow base with his feet not always at shoulder width apart. Sometimes they get a little in tight. That really struggles with his balls on the outside. Look at all the balls he threw in the combine. He threw in-breaking stuff, looked pretty good. Out-breaking stuff, a lot of loft, a lot of times the ball sailing. Didn't look awesome. And here's the thing. He's got a big enough arm. He can make the throw physically. His base is just junky. This is where I have a little bit of concern. I don't care if he doesn't have an agent. I don't care if mom wants to rep him as an agent. It doesn't bother me. But I do question, where is he training? Because footwork is something that we look at. A guy like Allen really improved at. Lamar Jackson didn't look awesome. That's a big concern for me right there.
Absolutely. All right, so let's kind of move on to linebacker. And the guy that we were gushing about heading into the combine was Leighton Vander Esch, and we were wondering, just how athletic he was. Well, 4.65 40 at 6'4", 256 pounds, 3 cone drills, 6.88. If you're under 7, that's good. And then 4.15 in the short shuttle. So all great numbers across the board. The problem is now he may have just vaulted himself into the first round. Now the Eagles might not get him.
There's no question he's a first-round pick, in my opinion. I think he's a guy who goes in the 20s to 32. Adrian, you and I talked about this off the show. This is not an exceptionally deep middle linebacker draft this year. So in turn, what happens is that value of middle linebackers, everyone gets slid up a couple more picks because it's not a really deep middle linebacker draft. When I looked at him, I had seen him, play at Boise, and I watched him play that Oregon game at the Las Vegas Bowl. He's an awesome player. My initial thought was, hey, this is a guy who's maybe going to fill C-gap to C-gap, probably never going to be a great pass coverage guy, and now he looked awesome in the combine. Looked like a 3-down linebacker. So, yeah, I think he's definitely going to be gone, unfortunately, by the time the Eagles pick. And the Eagles don't have the ammo to trade up to get him. So I think the Eagles are pretty much going to sit back and cross their fingers and hope that maybe, he said something mean to one of the GMs and that word got out, and then he can slip to the Eagles. But I think he'll be gone by probably 25.
Yeah, and I'm hearing that the Eagles like him too. So, I don't think they're going to be able to get him, unfortunately. So what other linebackers did you kind of like? Anybody else stand out to you?
I mean, the backers weren't super deep. I think, you look at guys like Edmonds. You look at a guy like, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on it, from Georgia, Roquan Smith. Those guys solidified it. I mean, both of those guys did great jobs. I think they're both going to be top 10 picks. So, I mean, like I said, it's not really a deep backer draft. The one question I always have, Evans coming out of Alabama.
Yes.
Okay, so here's a personal side story. So I had the chance to work out and train Eddie Lacy. Awesome dude. I love him. Still really good. Still one of my favorite people I've ever met. Eddie told me there are 2 things that are promised when you go to Alabama. You'll play for a national championship, and you'll have one major injury because that's how physical their practices are. So look at the past several years. Bama has had players slide in the draft because of medical situations. Linebackers, I want to know about the shoulder. I want to know how the labrum's going. I want to know if there's any rotator situation I need to know about. So there's a concern there with Evans because there's a prestige or assumption that linebackers coming out of Alabama typically aren't healthy. So where did he check out in the NFL, medical evaluation? That's going to be really important for him.
Yeah. All right. Some of the things that I was able to watch, by the way, we lost power here on the East Coast, and I didn't get to watch everything. Unfortunately, I do have things on my DVR, so I can watch things, but I didn't get to really see a lot of the quarterback stuff. It's more of the highlights that I saw. But I did get to see the DBs yesterday, and I was curious to see how Josh Jackson would work out and how Denzel Ward would work out. Ward looked really, really good, ran a 4.32, and then Jackson. And, in terms of the D-backs, those are some of the on-field drills that you can take seriously. And I didn't like what I saw from Josh Jackson.
I get it. So let's talk about Denzel Ward. Denzel Ward's biggest question is he going to measure in above 5'9"? Because his biggest concern is he's a smaller guy. Honestly, his explosiveness, his smaller build, but ability to still make plays in Denzel Ward, nothing off the field. But as far as a size, weight, speed, very similar to Pac-Man Jones. Very, very similar there. So if you are looking for an off corner who's probably not going to be your physical press guy, then he's a stud. He's going to be a top 10 pick. Flip side, I like Josh Jackson a lot. So I'm a little bit different than you, Adrian. I didn't have as much of a problem with what he did in the combine. Sure, you want to be really fluid and all of that, and I get that. But you know what? He's a bigger build guy. His ball production is really, really high. His 40 was fine. He wasn't running a Tease Tabor 40-yard dash type of thing. I still think that Josh Jackson is going to be a top 12 pick in the draft because, again, you have a lot of needy teams. I like him a lot. I think his production is really, really high. It just kind of comes down to what you want. If you want an off-ball guy who's going to be able to maybe move into the slot and track some of the speedy guys, then you probably like Ward. If you want more of a physical guy, more of like an Xavier Rhodes type build, then go Josh Jackson.
I did see some of the defensive tackles, and I gush about Vita Vea. I like him a lot. And he and Deron Payne, I thought, looked very, very fluid for the big men that they are. What did you think about some of the D linemen?
BJ Hill, I'm talking about him from NC State. He's a guy who had a hell of a Senior Bowl. I don't think he's going to get out of the second round. I think he's one of those guys who has really jumped up. So he's my winner of the D-line. When I watch these D-line run, in my head I'm just like, that's like 3 of me and 3 times faster than what I am. These guys are just behemoths of humans, and they're unbelievable talent. So those are the guys we look at, I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, from Stanford, big D tackle. We knew that he wasn't going to, really test out the charts. That's not really his skill set. He's going to be more of your guy who's going to win with physicality and win with effort. The Kyle Williams comparison are very, very fair to him. I think he's probably someone who's going to go in that late first, early second. So it's a good interior defensive tackle group. I love the fact that the Combine this year had them work out D tackles and then D ends separate. That really helps put everything in comparison quickly to the eye test.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so just one more guy before we depart. Orlando Brown was pitiful. Just how pitiful was he, and how far is he going to fall now?
Sorry about that. Had you on mute there.
That's okay.
It's laugh out loud level bad. I'll put it this way. I can't remember a time where I watched an NFL coach rip out a player at the Combine for loafing. That's how embarrassing that is, man. His numbers that he put up were some of the worst numbers historically. His numbers are closer to the averages of guys who go undrafted. When you're looking at him, look, I get it. Big men, they're not exactly, built like Greek gods, but he looks sloppy fat. There's a difference between being a big guy and sloppy. He looks sloppy. Just everything about him didn't look good there. Didn't look like, he really was training. I'd have to question it, and I don't like doing this, but I have to question it. How much does he love football? There's a lot of assumptions that can be made that, hey, he's playing football because his dad played in the NFL, and he's just doing it because he's a big human. well, if that's the case, I don't want you on my team. I think he's going to slide. He was rumored to be a first-round pick. I never liked him. I always thought he had way too narrow of a base. His feet just were never really in a good power position. I think he's going to be a day 3 pick guy, Adrian.
Yeah, I'm with you, and that's the point I was going to make. I mean, you know what the drills are. You know what to expect for the combine, and the fact that he wasn't ready, that's a huge red flag for me. I'm not even drafting him.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, look, he's one of those guys that you just look at and you're like, did you just roll out of bed and you're like, hey, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to go to the NFL combine. Because that's, dude, like, that's such BS. Like, it just looks so poor. Guy, I couldn't remember his name, Harrison Phillips from Stanford. I think he looked really good. A flip offensive lineman that I think was showed out that I didn't talk about, Desmond Harrison from, I think it's West Georgia, D2 player who originally was kicked out of Texas, came in over that 290 mark, looked really good. He was a guy that, the big questions were off the field, how does he interview? Something that, Adrian, obviously you and I will never really truly know. We'll just hear rumors about. But he looked really good. Could be a guy in that second, third round. Could be a guy who could be a future left tackle for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Actually, I did forget to talk about Bradley Chubb, so we'll just get into him real quick. All right, so he ran a 4.65, 1.63, 10-yard split. Very, very good, 36-inch vertical. But the three-cone drill was a 7.37, which, you would like to see it under 7. Any worries there at all?
Not much for me. I mean, just because, here's the thing. He reminds me a lot of Bosa in that, Joey Bosa didn't have a great combine. I mean, his 40 was slow, his 10-yard split was slow, but his hand usage is so good. His ability to dip and get hip to hip and rip underneath is fantastic. So I don't have a real concern with him. I still think Chubb's a top 5 guy. If the Colts don't trade out of 3, he's a lock there because the Colts are moving to a 4-3 defense. Bradley Chubb, Joey Bosa, very similar, ideal fit for a 4-3 D end. I think he'd be a lock there. If the Colts trade out, then maybe he slides a little bit, goes to a team like Tampa at 7.
Yeah, I mean, the on-field drills aren't everything. Derek Barnett didn't exactly test well last year either.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. And these guys all have the production to back it up. The one thing you usually get excited about for defensive linemen is a 10-yard split in the 40-yard dash. I'll use a guy like Jordan Willis for coming out of Kansas State. He was my guy last year who I circled, and I said, hey, I know he's raw. I know he doesn't have a lot of pass rush moves, but he was 1.54. If you're usually sub 1.6, you're zooming. Bradley Chubb was just over 1.6, which is all right. But, that's usually the one thing for those edge rush DN guys. It's not a huge deal for them in the combine. I think that's important. 3-cone's important. But if you have elite level hand usage like Bradley Chubb does, all these numbers can kind of go by the wayside because film shows you something different.
Any other names on your radar? Any other sleepers that you kind of liked out there? Anybody come to mind?
Man, I mean, you go to the receivers, I thought Deion Kane ran exactly what I thought he was going to do. Cortland Sutton did a good job running what I thought he was going to do. So those are 2 guys I liked. Antonio Callaway, a guy from Florida who just couldn't get out of his own way. He's probably a guy who's going to be that 6th to undrafted, depending on how he did in those interviews. He's very, very electric. DJ Shark, LSU, a guy who ran blazing speed off the track. He's someone who we could see in a couple years have really good production. Now, the knock on him is where's his production at, LSU? Flip side, guys like Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry didn't exactly have elite level production at LSU. That's a program that historically has struggled throwing the ball. Bradley Chubb, I was shocked, blown away that he ran faster than Sony Michel. That blew me away. That said, I still think Sony Michel goes drafted significantly higher than him. I don't think Bradley Chubb's inability to catch the ball is something – Nick Chubb, excuse me. Nick Chubb, his inability to catch the ball consistently is a big concern for me. So there's a guy there. You go to tight end. Matt McGlinchey is a guy that we talked about. Adrian was going to light up the combine, was going to be able to, do all the sexy underwear Olympic stuff. So, but again, hasn't blocked anyone. To be fair, neither has Jimmy Graham. So I think he's probably a guy in that 2nd round situation there. Bunch of guys that kind of did what we thought they were going to do. There was no one who really I kind of turned my head and said, "Ooh, wow, that really shocked me." Everyone was pretty much in that range. So,
yeah. The only guy, well, he didn't really shock us, but the fact that Orlando Brown was so bad, that was the guy that was like, ew, really, like yuck. So, there you go. All right, that's about it from us. That's Brennan Albert. I'm Adrian Fedke. Stay tuned to the channel because we will be doing some basically some scatter reports, some tape, some film room study. And we're going to start with some linebackers. So that's what we'll do kind of next week. I'm going to look at some tape and get into some things. And Brent and I will spitball some stuff. Maybe we can get some mock drafts going because people are asking me for mock drafts. They want mock drafts. So I guess you and I will do like a first-round mock draft, and we'll kind of do that and kind of compare, and we'll spitball on the show, and we'll figure that out.
Let's do it. Love it.
All right. That's Brennan. I'm Adrian. We're out. Peace.
Later.